Welcome back to the Gooner Fanzine Arsenal Women podcast. Pre-season is nearly done. My understanding is Arsenal have one intra-squad friendly this Sunday, but in terms of actual friendlies against opposition and in front of crowds, Arsenal are all done. A 4-3 defeat to Tottenham and then a 2-0 win over West Ham. That follows wins over Bristol City, Southampton, and Eintracht Frankfurt. Izzy, you were there for the Gooner, as was Daisy, as was Leif last night. What was the atmosphere like, first of all? Because pre-season is a strange one. It wasn't sold out, and I guess it's probably a night that shows why Arsenal still need Meadow Park as this sort of second venue if you're not going to sell it out for a friendly.
Yeah, I mean, I think they announced the attendance of being over 2,500, which is pretty good for a preseason friendly. And considering there wasn't a huge amount of notice for these games, obviously a bit more for this one than the Tottenham one on Saturday. And it's a weekday evening, 7 p.m. start, so not the easiest for everyone to get to. But yeah, the atmosphere was great. I quite enjoyed hearing the new chants for the new players. Daisy will know more than me what it was like in the North Bank. But yeah, sitting pretty close to it anyway in the press box, and quite strange with the new layout of Bournemouth that you are sitting behind the players in their dugouts now, which is quite interesting because you can actually hear Renee Slegers and her team talking about things and who's going to go on, and you get a little bit more of a sense of the behind the scenes. But yeah, I thought the atmosphere was good. West Ham had a couple of fans in the corner, but I couldn't really hear them over all the noise Arsenal was making. But yeah, I think it is important to keep Meadow Park on, and I think people love it as well. So not just because of a numbers thing, but just because of the kind of memories that place holds. And yeah, I think it's a good thing to have on the back burner.
Yeah, I'm so excited to do some games in the press box there because, as you say, right next to the dugouts now, you can look down and see everything and hear everything. Daisy, the most common chant seems to be about going to Lisbon and winning the Champions League, doesn't it? That just keeps ringing out.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to live off that moment forever. But it got to the point against Tottenham, obviously, after the loss, where we didn't really have much more to sing about than the fact that we'd won that trophy over them. And that started that. And then last night, obviously, we started singing it again. And it became a bit like that Shake It Caldente one, where it went on for about 20 minutes. You never really know, especially when we have the people at the back banging the back of the stand. That tends to be some sort of chant on repeat. But the thing about, I think, having it at Meadow Park and having these pre-season games is we got to test out a few chants. We tried sort of actually coming up with it on the spot. I think someone had a brief idea of the Olivia Smith one and it kind of carried around, and then we tried a few different lyrics, and every time we sang it, it changed slightly. So I guess that is a weird advantage of having a pre-season, is we get to practice almost some of the chants that for the new players, a few different ones being tried out. Some of them obviously don't succeed as well as others, but yeah, it was a really nice atmosphere. I really think compared to Spurs, I think the last minute arrangement of the game against Spurs probably threw us off slightly, but lots of people there yesterday, sort of people that new people as well, which was nice. But yeah, I agree. Meadow Park is just so special to us, and obviously it's huge for the game that we're having more games at the Emirates. But I think Meadow Park will always be there. We're still going to, see it for cup games and Champions League group stage and things like that. So it's not going anywhere. But perfect place to come back, I think, and have a pre-season friendly and get to test out chance and see players and things like that. So yeah, really, really good night.
Izzy, I thought Kyra Cooney-Cross had a good night. It's an interesting sort of period, isn't it, for Arsenal's midfield of where Leah Valti and Kim Little are in their careers. And I think there's an element of this is a big season, maybe a transitional season, certainly for the two sixes, in that Arsenal midfield, or a 6 and an 8, if you like, with Mariona or one more attacking player in there. But I thought Kyra played a very responsible sort of role last night. She was almost deeper than Kim quite a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, I've always enjoyed watching Cara Cooney-Cross, and I've always sung her praises. If you go back to this kind of during the season last year on the podcast, I always talk about how I thought she was going to be the player of the season last year, and then she kind of stopped getting minutes. So I'm really hoping that this might be her season and she might be able to come into this side a little bit more regularly throughout the season. But yeah, I enjoyed watching her last night. I thought that every time she plays, she looks more confident, more assured, and certainly last night was an example of that. I think playing with Kim Little, that's a really good experience for her to learn from someone like Kim, who's just been such a kind of staple in that Arsenal side for so many years, and who might be coming to the end of her career. You need someone who can play a slightly similar role. Yeah, you said she was playing a bit deeper last night. I think that she's very good in tight spaces. The ball's very good at she's very good at keeping the ball stuck to her feet and dribbling through people. And yeah, she was keeping the midfield in check, I thought, last night. And yeah, definitely someone I really love watching. But yeah, she's still young. She's still got loads of seasons left in her, and hopefully Arsenal can keep her interested by giving her enough minutes this season.
And Daisy, what does Victoria Palova's role look like this season? What do you think? Because she played a really nice ball and that little spin and then the ball in behind to assist Frida Marnham. I think we know coming off the end of last season what Rene's preferred team and preferred midfield is, but there's going to be players knocking on the door.
100%. This has been the hardest discussion going into even before pre-season and going into this new season is what that midfield is going to look like. I've written pieces that I've argued that she would love to keep that midfield that worked so well for her, maybe dependent on minutes for the likes of Kim. Obviously, like we're saying, there's a chance for a transition there and Kyra getting more minutes, but it's never been a like for like. I don't think it's just a case of taking one out, bringing someone else in and it working. The balance has not always been there, and we've seen that. This we saw against Spurs. I don't think that midfield necessarily worked. Last night we were missing Mariona, obviously. I think that was a minutes thing and obviously trying to rest her slightly, but we definitely lacked that creativity from Mariona. It looks for me like Palova is being utilised as a number 10, similar to the role that we've seen Frida Marnham play. And we've seen less of Mariona playing that towards the end of last season. She was sort of dropping deeper, sort of playing like a 6 role like we've described, but obviously with a lot more creativity and time on the ball and being involved in the attack and still getting up there with top goal scorers. So you can't really take Mariona out that side either, but we got an opportunity to see a different midfield that I think also worked yesterday. Lots of control in there, definitely helped by Kim Little. I sang her praises straight away from the start because you could see the difference in the way that Arsenal control the midfield when she plays, and Kyra having a good game as well helped. I did at one point think this game needed somebody like Frida Marnham. I mean, I think she is underrated in that system and was last season. The amount of goals that she scored, contributions she had, the way that the midfield would work when she played and sort of struggle when she didn't. So she obviously showed as well what she can do in the goal scoring contributions, which I didn't think we saw as much last season, but we have in previous seasons. So it's going to be tough. I think Palova also plays the number 10 great. Is that her preferred position? Probably not. But it looks like to get everyone to work, to play minutes, to keep everyone happy, Rene is going to have to, expect of these players to play positions they're not keen to play. People didn't prefer Kyra in that deeper position, maybe thinking she'd be more effective in the role that Palova or Mariona were playing, but then you miss out on them. So it really is a dilemma, but as we can see, if we can get the balance right, we can rotate and we can still be successful in different games. That might be something that Rene looks to going forward, not always playing the same 3.
Yeah, I think well, we all know what the conversation can be in terms of around where certainly Kim and then Leah Valtier in a year's time, but surely if you're a midfielder in this Arsenal side, you know your opportunities are going to come. And even if they're not, you'd expect a little more this season for the likes of Cooney Cross, but further down the line, you've got to be having that vision of seeing maybe these opportunities opening up and big boots to fill. Not just yet, of course. The new signings, Olivia Smith came on and played centrally, which I don't think we'll see loads of this season, to be honest. But that's what pre-season's for. It's been quite an experimental couple of games in front of the fans, which I think also when you're playing West Ham again in 2 weeks, Izzy, sort of makes a lot of sense. You're not going to play exactly how you're going to go against them in a couple of weeks' time. It's the second game of the season, but we've certainly seen some glimpses, haven't we, of what Olivia Smith can do.
Yeah, definitely. I think just speaking to Renee Slegers afterwards, she was saying that she's seen players in different positions this preseason. She's really pleased with how the preseason has gone. She used the word constellations. She's seen different constellations of players, which I thought was quite nice. And yeah, I think Olivia Smith in that kind of number 9 position is probably not something we'll see all the time, but it's good to know that she's able to play that position if we needed her to. I think that she's probably still getting used to playing in an Arsenal shirt in this setup. She's still young, but I can think you can definitely see her potential. They made 7 subs at halftime and then quite quickly afterwards kept subbing people on. I've never done so many player ratings in one match in my life. But yeah, I think that they're not going to give away their tactics ahead of playing West Ham again in 2 weeks. So by changing basically the whole team at halftime, you're keeping West Ham on their toes. And you're just seeing how well the Arsenal side are able to adapt and play in different combinations and different formations. So I think it can only be a positive thing. Came away with the win as well. And yeah, Olivia Smith didn't get a lot of action in that 9 role. I didn't think Alessia Russo did in the first half either, to be honest. I think that we weren't putting as many balls in as normal across that box. I don't know if that was something to do with the way West Ham play, but yeah, I think I'm excited to see her settle into maybe more of her natural position on the wing.
Daisy, the Tottenham game, I haven't watched sort of back in full. I've only seen glimpses of it. How good was it sort of for a calmer evening last night, I guess, because there's been a lot of these end-to-end games under Rene, certainly towards the end of last season, the Brighton, the Villa games. Was Tottenham maybe a little bit of a glimpse that some of those transitional issues and defensive mistakes haven't quite gone away?
Yeah, absolutely. I was talking to somebody prior to last night's game about the Tottenham game and sort of saying, the 4 goals that Arsenal conceded were all mistakes. In a real sort of WSL game, how many times does that actually happen? How many times do you make 4 mistakes that cost you 4 goals? I think I spoke to you briefly before we started the podcast, Freddie, about Daphne Van Domselaar coming back into that side and just steadying the back four. I mean, it was the same back four that played, obviously, by the goalkeeper. It's a debut as well for Boba, so you can't really say too much about her individually. She needs time to settle, but I do think there was a huge difference when Arsenal play with a goalkeeper that's used to playing in that system, that understands the back four, and I think it studied the likes of Steph Catley, who had a better game against West Ham. All our fullbacks have been very, very good across both games. I don't think they were to blame for anything that kind of happened in the Spurs game, but even seeing, Taylor Hines coming in and doing really well and being able to drop into midfield and learning the system so quickly. Having players like Sophie Howard coming and playing at full back, or Katie Reid, it's really nice to see that we have that defensive stability even if we're changing it. And if you talk about the 2 games, Spurs obviously a lot of mistakes and you can't really make them in a WSL game because it will cost you. But keeping a clean sheet against West Ham, it is a huge achievement. They've had a really successful pre-season. They look like a side that will definitely do well next season, and I think they'll be challenging a lot more than they maybe were. But that's sort of achievement in itself, to be able to make that many changes, still play your game, still be defensively solid. I think we were much better at that in the second game against West Ham than we were in the first. But yeah, it is great to see that no matter who comes in. I think Frida Marnham said that in an interview after the game, that you make 7-8 changes and you still play the Arsenal way, you still play the way we want to play. So I think that's huge going into next season, and hopefully there's not defensive mistakes like that when we actually get going in the league, because obviously that can cost you games.
Yeah, we're nearly there. London City Lionesses at home, West Ham away. On a Friday night, they're not always an easy opponent, certainly in recent seasons. So the WSL not far away. We're going to do a little bit of a season preview. What sort of pressure do you think is on Arsenal this season, Izzy? Because for me, it's the best kind of pressure is when you've put it on yourself. And when you've won the Champions League, you automatically put that pressure on yourself to go and win it. But are they under pressure to win the league? Or, what does it feel like? Because they're under good pressure, aren't they? There's different types.
Yeah, I think that it is obviously good pressure, because how amazing that they're coming into this season as the holders of the Champions League. And I don't think the fans or anyone's going to let any of the other clubs forget that they've done that. But I do think that there is a pressure to perform well domestically, whether that's the league or the FA Cup or even the League Cup, which we've had a couple of times in more recent years. But I just think that if you go and prove yourself on the European stage like that, you have to be able to do it at home as well. And I think that it'll frustrate the fans and it'll frustrate the players if if Arsenal have these losses like they've had in previous seasons to teams that they should be beating, or these bad results, these draws or these losses that ultimately kind of hand the league over to Chelsea or whoever it is that's above them in the table, because Chelsea aren't getting those results. They're able to just get the job done. And I think Arsenal need to display that kind of element of being able to get it over the line, even if it's not everyone's best day and it's not their best performance. At the end of the day, they've beaten Barcelona, they've beaten Lyon over 2 legs, they've beaten Real Madrid over 2 legs. They've done that and they've proved they can do that. And so I don't know if it's a situation where they were in a lot of pressure in those Champions League games and that helped them, and whether maybe the pressure to perform domestically might help in this scenario as well. But yeah, it's a long season. As Renee Steger said last night, they've got a lot of big games coming up, and I think they do treat every game like a big game, and that's the attitude that they need to have going in, because I do feel like it is time for Arsenal to bring home another domestic trophy, and I'd love to see them winning the WSL.
How important, Daisy, is the squad depth? Because it was a quick start to the transfer window, and it's been mostly sort of outgoings and loans since. Still plenty of more loans to be announced. Would you like to see any more incomings, or would it have to be a very good player in a certain position? And how crucial are the additions in terms of closing down Chelsea?
Yeah, I think for me, the only other signing that I would have considered this window would probably have been that six, that CDM position, which I know has been the most talked about thing. Every time we put an article or a podcast out about anything, somebody comes in the comments and says Arsenal need to buy a defender or they need to buy a central defensive midfielder. So I think that was been the only one. At centre back, I did have concerns going into that Spurs game, but I do look at that now, having seen, like I said, I need to see another game before I make that assumption, and having seen that. I do feel like that's a case of potentially how the combination works as a five, including the goalkeeper. And I think having someone like Daphne in and then being able to rely more on those centre backs is going to make a difference. And it's also they're going to be a lot more assured in defence than I thought they were going to be going into that Spurs game. So for me, I'm very happy with the squad depth. I'm hoping a few of the talented youngsters that we saw, like Sophie Howard, really impressed me. I'm not obviously not sure at this point whether she will stay, but I would love to see more of her if she does. And I think Katie Reid obviously being a part of that squad. But I'm really happy with the signings we brought in, not just because of the impact they can have in games where Arsenal, like Izzy saying, need to get over the line, they need to win, but also to challenge those who are already in that starting 11, which we didn't have enough of last season. And I think it led to complacency. It led to players like, not always the same people, but players like McCabe or maybe Russo or anyone like that, maybe not performing to the best of their ability because they're not feeling challenged by those who are sitting on the bench. But when Taylor Hines is playing a half over you, and then you've got likes of Jenna Naswong, who I think had a good pre-season, challenging for spots, and obviously the midfield battle as well. It's going to push us even further, and it's not just a case of needing players like Marnham to come off and score a goal, but also to put pressure on those that are already in that starting 11, and that's how I think Arsenal succeed next season. But consistency is huge, and it's something I think we didn't see. Obviously, Rennes didn't have a lot of games, but there was times like we would go and win against Lyon and then struggle against Villa and Brighton. So if we don't build that consistency soon, we are not going to win the WSL, because that's exactly what Sonia's managed to do so well with Chelsea.
Is it Arsenal versus Chelsea? Is it a two-horse race? What do you think about Manchester United? Because for me, I think the Champions League is huge for them, and I think their squad depth is probably still a way off. Sort of the top two, top three. Man City have had a good transfer window, on the whole, but is it all about closing down Chelsea?
Yeah, I do think ultimately it is about closing down Chelsea. I think that Chelsea are just a little bit more established than Manchester United and Manchester City. You look at Manchester City last season was quite poor in terms of what they could have achieved, and now they've got this new manager. They might get a new manager bounce. It could be quite positive for them after their summer transfer window. And they've got no Champions League football, so maybe they'll have a bit more time, a bit more rest between games, and they'll be able to perform well domestically. We'll have to wait and see. And I think with Manchester United, they haven't been particularly busy this summer if you compare them to what Arsenal have done, for example. And I think that they will be really excited to perform in Europe and perform in those Champions League games. But yeah, I do think that Chelsea are the ultimate kind of team to put a target on. They have been the champion season after season after season, and I think that is something that needs to be stopped. I think also for the growth of the women's game, if you just have a serial winner who wins every single year, it doesn't become an exciting thing for people to tune into, especially if it's decided a couple of games before the end of the season, like it was last year. So I think it'll be really great if we could take it down to the wire and maybe get a result over Chelsea this year, because last year wasn't so positive. So I think that it's those small margins, and I think Arsenal need to become good at winning when they need to, and that's not something that we've become used to seeing. I think you kind of watching as a fan, you'll sort of think, oh, they're going to throw it away today, because I feel like there's just not a lot of faith. There hasn't been this faith that's built up that Arsenal are able to take it over the line. So I'd love to see it this season. And this squad does look a little bit more promising, and I think it is very exciting. And I'd love to see Chelsea come away with a silver or bronze medal rather than that gold spot that they've had, because, yeah, not a fan.
Is the WSL stronger though? Again, Daisy, I mean, London City have had a remarkable transfer window. It's been almost a whole sort of clear out. Everton have invested well. Brighton as well. Villa need a better season. I fear a bit for the likes of Liverpool, Leicester, Tottenham have got a new manager in. So in terms of these games where traditionally Arsenal will go and it would be the low block, and they'd struggle sometimes against them, but also be fancied to win. Do you think the league again continues to go from strength to strength in terms of these mid-table, lower sides investing?
Yeah, definitely. I think if you can look at it from both sides, I think the more competitive that the league gets, in some way it actually benefits Arsenal, because I think we would go into games against, like you say, against those sides who would be struggling at the bottom and they would just put everybody behind the ball and that would be it. But actually, Arsenal play 10 times better when teams go and attack them. If you look at London City, I think, talking about that game first, obviously with it coming up, I don't see them sitting back. I don't see them sort of putting everyone behind the ball, asking Arsenal to break that down. I think the more the teams go at Arsenal, the more it benefits them. And I also look at that from the Chelsea perspective, obviously being a rival going into the league. If no, the teams aren't just Chelsea can break down a low block, but if teams are putting Chelsea under more pressure, I see them making defensive errors that they made in quite a lot of those big games. For example, against Barcelona, when they came up against a team who could actually attack, they tend to struggle a lot more than they do against those low blocks. So if you look at it from both sides, it could actually benefit these bigger teams. But yeah, you can't write off anybody, and it is going to be more difficult to get results. I think we're going to see the scorelines being very different to what they used to be. I don't think we're going to be seeing sort of teams getting battered or teams getting beaten really, by many goals. I think if you look at the 4-3 against Spurs, West Ham going and beating Liverpool 3-0. I think there was so much lack of continuity in teams as well last season that might change a lot, but you might not know who's going to beat who, and that's what makes it more exciting. So I'm looking forward to the battle for the top half of the table. I think that's going to be really, really interesting, and sadly, there are some teams that haven't invested as much that may struggle, that are still going through transitional periods as well. So, how those teams like Manchester City do when they've got to integrate new players and a new manager, and a lot of the teams are in a similar boat, that's going to impact us how the league goes. So, there's lots to think about, but I do think there could actually be a benefit to Arsenal in that sense.
Friday, the 5th of September, first game of the season, Chelsea versus Manchester City. I mean, if that finishes level and they take a point each and Arsenal win, and straight away, almost you put yourself in the driving seat, don't you, Izzy? I mean, is that the result Arsenal fans will be hoping for, or will they want City to win?
Yeah, of course. I mean, either way, I think Arsenal fans will be hoping that Chelsea either come away with 1 point or no points. But I think that that's a really exciting game to have as the first game of the season. I remember the first game of last season, I think, was Chelsea versus Aston Villa, and Aston Villa almost got a result or got a draw against Chelsea, I think, in the end there. And I think the first game of the season is a perfect time to play Chelsea, and especially when it's a bigger opponent like Manchester City. And those two teams know each other quite well, as we know from the kind of 4 or 5 times they played each other in a month last season. So excited to see the return of that fixture. But yeah, I think it'll be great. I think Arsenal will probably be focused on their first game of the season, rather than looking at results elsewhere, or that's what they'll say anyway. And I do think that the more signings London City make, the more nervous I'm getting about that match. But equally, I think, as I said, with Chelsea and City, it's a perfect day to play that match, because that team won't have had as much time to get used to each other. And I think that the first fixture against London City will look very different to when we then go away to them later in the season.
Right, I heard there's an Arseblog doing their Premier League season preview the other week, and they did a hot take each. I haven't thought of one yet, and because I'm hosting, it means I get to push it over to one of you two. Who's got a hot take for Arsenal's WSL season?
I thought about this a lot, and what kind of thing we could talk about. For me, I want to focus on playing at the Emirates, playing all 11 home games. I think Arsenal will go unbeaten at home. I don't think anyone will beat Arsenal at the Emirates. I'm gonna say that we get a result like we did when we beat Chelsea 4-1, not maybe of that high scoreline, but I genuinely think that building on the atmosphere there and having sort of a big crowd hopefully attending every single week, or a bigger crowd than we would have at Meadow Park, will benefit Arsenal, and the continuity of playing the same venue. So I'm going to go Arsenal unbeaten all 11 games at home. I'm not going to say invincible because that might be too far, but I'll go on unbeaten at home.
Izzy, have you got anything? I'm still thinking.
I'm still thinking as well. I'd like to say I think Arsenal are going to win the FA Cup this season. I have a feeling that we have the squad depth to go and do something like that. And I remember speaking to Beth Mead ages and ages ago, and she's been at Arsenal for so long, and she said, I've never won the FA Cup. And I'm thinking that's how long it's been since Arsenal have managed to get their hands on that trophy. So that's something I'd really like to see, and something that I definitely think is realistic, and I think Arsenal could do. It'd be really cool to have that day out at Wembley. I think that we'd fill the allocation pretty well, and I think that it's something that would look good in René Segers' trophy cabinet. So I'll say Arsenal to win the FA Cup.
So I'm going to go Arsenal unbeaten against City and Chelsea in terms of you looking at the top side. I think if I almost worry more about based on evidence at the end of last season, as you say, the likes of London City, West Ham. I think Arsenal maybe have become a big game team, which they weren't sometimes under Jonas Eidevall. I mean, it went from sort of the being good against low blocks to being bad against low blocks and being good against the big teams to then struggling against your Chelseas, your Bayern Munich's, of course, in the Champions League. But I think that Barcelona win is just going to give them so much confidence and almost that blueprint you can fall back on when you are playing against a team like Chelsea and you're under pressure and with the squad depth as well. And if you go unbeaten against those sides, you should be able to then do the rest, and get hopefully a league title over the line. So there's probably nothing outrageous there, but also, enough Chelsea fans do tune into this and will happily clip things up. Where if I say Arsenal are going to beat Chelsea twice, then I'm going to get all sorts of comments coming my way that I don't need. So yeah, we're nearly there. We've had it's been a long summer. Actually, great to have the Euros in the middle of it, but I feel like we've been counting down the days till this London City Lionesses game. 1:30 kickoff, then away to West Ham the following week, then away to Manchester United for a 2:50 kickoff. I've still yet to find out why it's that certain time, and I think that's going to be an interesting side. Just finally, Daisy, from the fans' point of view, the sort of change in TV rights and well, not necessarily the rights, but Sky have got more games, haven't they? And that's meant the scheduling. There's a focus on sort of Sunday lunchtime kickoffs and some of the away games at the best kickoff time. I mean, is it at risk of going down the same TV route as the men's game, where almost fans are just a second thought? I mean, it might be like that anyway now, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. You've got the combination of asking people to get to away games early in the day, especially when it's on the other side of the country. Plus the discussion that was all over social media about, you trying to get young girls and boys to get into women's football and then scheduling at the time when people would typically play football if they wanted to play for a grassroots side. So there's lots of negatives to it. Obviously, great to see women's football being on TV. Like, we're never going to complain about that, but there's still got to be some consideration, I feel, to when they're putting it and where they're putting it. And yeah, it is quite difficult to get down there when you're leaving quite early in the morning, especially if you're coming from the other side of the country. So consideration still needs to be made if the game's going to grow successfully to those fans who travel. And Arsenal, we know, have such great travelling, home and away support. So the fans have to be considered, and maybe there will be some as the season goes on, kind of realisation about that a bit more.
Mm. Champions League draw also 3 weeks tomorrow, so then we get to start planning our European days, which is just we are so lucky to be able to do that, and I can't wait for that draw. Already been keeping an eye on where I want to go in terms of the teams who are winning in the qualifying round, which of course Arsenal are not taking part in after winning the Champions League. Izzy, you must be really looking forward to getting back to the Emirates, and I'm going as a fan for the first game. I've forked out for club level because it's the same price as a normal ticket for the men's game, so I thought why not? And also tickets, it still astounds me how quickly tickets sell. I'm still in this sort of situation from when I first went as a fan in sort of 2021, where you could just pick a ticket up and rock up whenever you wanted. It's so different now, but you must be looking forward to getting back in the press box at the Emirates.
Yeah, I can't wait. Just being there last night at Meadow Park for the West Ham game just made me super excited. Just seeing some familiar faces in the press box, and I'll be excited to see a few more when we get back on the 6th of September. And yeah, I love going there. They do look after us very well, so I'll be excited to see what kind of result we can get that day, and yeah, see what London City look like. It's a really good game to have first. I'm so excited.
Mm. And well, I'm on holiday next week, so you two will have a podcast out speaking to Farah Chowdhury, chair of the Arsenal Women Supporters Club. Daisy, just for people who want to tune into that, it's going to be out next Wednesday. And what sort of stuff did you cover?
Yeah, lots of exciting stuff, especially those new fans who are getting into Arsenal, getting into women's football. If you are, or even if you're just interested in learning more about how to be involved at the meetups, away days, everything from what pub to go to what tube station to get off at, to how to buy your Guna, which is obviously such important information that you cannot miss. There's all on there. Farah, it would be great to speak to her, and just basically, yeah, anything to do with match days. I tried to share some of how we make the chants and how they come about. So lots of insider knowledge, and we've tried our best to be so-called experts on the matter. So I'll say Farah is a bit more of an expert than me, but yeah, lots to look forward to. If you're a new fan or you're coming or you're wanting to make new friends or learn more about how things work, it's definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, and to all of you listening, any queries, do just reach out to all of us. We're all on social media and all happy to respond to messages, comments, anything, particularly as you say, around the Guna, which will be on sale. I've had a couple of people actually reach out about selling it in the last couple of weeks, outside the Emirates before the London City game, 1:30 kickoff. So get there nice and early, because from what we're told, the Champions League edition not far from selling out as well. So if you want to get your hands on that piece of memorabilia, then time is running out. Daisy, Izzy, great stuff. Looking forward to seeing you both, for a nice pint or something after the opening game.
Yeah,
Looking forward
definitely.
to it.